The courtroom fell silent as 70-year-old Marcus Washington, a decorated black veteran with a prosthetic leg, collapsed to the floor. Judge Carlton had refused his request to remain seated. Now, as oxygen masks descended and cameras flashed, nobody realized this moment would change America's justice system forever. Before we dive into this powerful story of injustice and resilience, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and join our community fighting for justice. The moment Marcus Washington hit that courtroom floor, America would never be the same, and you'll want to see exactly why. Marcus Washington wasn't always at odds with the justice system. For 30 years, he served his country with unwavering dedication, completing 3 grueling tours in Vietnam, where he witnessed horrors that would haunt him for life. His service record sparkled with commendations, including the prestigious Purple Heart and Bronze Star, awards that testified to his exceptional courage under fire. The medals, however, came at an unimaginable cost. During an ambush in his final tour, Marcus made a split-second decision that saved his entire unit, but cost him his right leg. Enemy fire had pinned down his squad, and without hesitation, Marcus charged forward, drawing enemy fire away from his fellow soldiers. The memory of that day remained vivid in his mind. The deafening explosions, the smell of gunpowder, and the searing pain as shrapnel tore through his leg. Military doctors fought to save it, but ultimately amputation was the only option. His return to civilian life proved nearly as challenging as combat. Despite his qualifications and experience in military logistics, employers seemed reluctant to hire a black veteran with a disability. The rejections came with polite smiles and vague explanations, but Marcus recognized the prejudice behind their eyes. PTSD compounded his struggles, triggering flashbacks during thunderstorms and leaving him trembling at sudden loud noises. Simple tasks like grocery shopping became overwhelming expeditions into hostile territory. After years of instability, Marcus finally found purpose in volunteering at the Oakwood Community Center, mentoring at-risk youth in his predominantly black neighborhood. He connected with young people through his military stories, teaching discipline and resilience while steering them away from the violence that plagued their streets. His calm voice and steady presence became a beacon for children who had few positive male role models. His personal life carried its own burden of tragedy. After losing his beloved wife Eleanor to cancer 15 years earlier, Marcus faced another devastating blow when his only daughter Jasmine died in a car accident 3 years ago. This left him solely responsible for raising his grandson Jamal, a bright, earnest 14-year-old who represented his entire world. Their modest home became a sanctuary of mutual support, with Jamal helping his grandfather navigate technology, while Marcus imparted wisdom earned through hardship. The incident that thrust Marcus into the legal system occurred during a peaceful protest against police brutality following the shooting of an unarmed black teenager in their community. Marcus hadn't planned to participate given his mobility challenges, but when Jamal insisted on attending, he accompanied his grandson as protection. What began as a peaceful demonstration escalated when police in riot gear arrived and began aggressive crowd dispersal tactics. Marcus watched in horror as officers roughly handled a young protester who resembled his grandson. Instinctively, he intervened, using his cane to maintain balance while placing himself between the young man and the officers. What happened next remained contested. Police claimed Marcus assaulted an officer with his cane, while Marcus maintained he merely lost his balance when pushed and reached out to steady himself. The security footage that might have clarified the truth mysteriously became corrupted during evidence collection, leaving only conflicting testimonies. District Attorney Richard Holloway, a white man with thinly veiled political ambitions and a campaign built on law and order rhetoric, pursued maximum charges against Marcus. Behind closed doors, staff members overheard Holloway referring to the case as an opportunity to send a message to these protesters. The racial undertones in the prosecution's approach became apparent during case preparation, as they selectively interviewed witnesses who supported their narrative while ignoring those who contradicted it. Marcus could only afford a court-appointed attorney, Sarah Chen, a dedicated but overwhelmed young Asian-American lawyer only 3 years out of law school. Despite her crushing caseload, Sarah recognized the injustice in Marcus's situation and committed herself to his defense with remarkable determination. Their first pre-trial hearing revealed the magnitude of their challenge when Judge William Carlton entered the courtroom. The older white judge, known for his military background and rigid adherence to traditional values, made his bias evident. From the beginning, he addressed the prosecution with respectful attention, but frequently interrupted Sarah's statements with impatient sighs and dismissive gestures. The atmosphere in the courtroom chilled noticeably when Judge Carlton reviewed Marcus's file and looked up with thinly disguised contempt. "I see a lot of troublemakers these days hiding behind their military service," he remarked, the statement hanging in the air like a death sentence for Marcus's hopes of fair treatment. The words struck Marcus like physical blows, each syllable a rejection of his sacrifice and service. In that moment, looking into the judge's cold eyes, Marcus understood that his medals and scars held no currency in this courtroom. The system he had fought to protect had no intention of protecting him. This wasn't Marcus Washington's first encounter with a justice system that seemed designed to work against him. 5 years earlier, he had been falsely accused of shoplifting at Greenwood department store, when a clerk noticed him placing an item in his pocket before continuing to shop. In reality, Marcus had simply been making room in his hands to better manage his balance with his cane while selecting a birthday gift for Jamal. Security guards approached him aggressively, ignoring his calm explanations and parading him through the store in handcuffs despite having paid receipts for all items in his possession. The humiliation burned deep, but the charges were eventually dropped when store cameras confirmed his innocence. No apology ever came. Judge William Carlton brought a troubling history to Marcus's case. Court records revealed he had been reprimanded twice by the Judicial Ethics Committee for racially insensitive comments, including telling a black female attorney that she was surprisingly articulate and suggesting that a Latino defendant should have stayed on his side of the border if he wanted fair treatment. These reprimands resulted in mandatory sensitivity training, but no meaningful consequences for his career. Carlton served in Vietnam contemporaneously with Marcus, but in an administrative capacity far from combat, a fact he obscured by vaguely referencing his time in the service while wearing his veteran status like a shield against criticism. District Attorney Richard Holloway approached Marcus's case with calculated precision, recognizing its potential value to his upcoming campaign for state office. His Tough on Crime platform specifically targeted communities of color while using coded language about urban elements and restoring order to troubled neighborhoods. Privately educated and born into wealth, Holloway had never experienced the systemic barriers faced by defendants like Marcus, nor did he demonstrate any interest in understanding them. His press conferences about the case consistently characterized Marcus as violent and dangerous without evidence, poisoning potential jurors against him before trial even began. Local media largely adopted the prosecution's framing, featuring Marcus's mugshot prominently, while rarely mentioning his military service or community work. News segments about the case typically included B-roll footage of unrelated riots and looting, creating a visual association between Marcus and violence that existed only in the editing room. The exception to this narrative came from investigative journalist Tamika Robinson, a tenacious reporter for the Independent City Observer, who began questioning inconsistencies in the official account. Her initial article noting the convenient corruption of security footage raised questions that mainstream outlets ignored, earning her threatening calls from police union representatives and a sudden cancellation of her press credentials at the East courthouse. Sarah Chen's investigation into Marcus's case revealed disturbing patterns extending far beyond his situation. County court records showed black veterans consistently received sentences averaging 40% longer than their white counterparts for identical offenses. When defendants requested accommodation for service-related disabilities, judges granted them to white veterans at triple the rate of black veterans. The statistics painted a clear picture of systemic discrimination that most preferred to ignore. While the adults fought legal battles, young Jamal Washington faced his own ordeal at school. Previously a popular student with good grades, he now endured whispered comments about his criminal grandfather and found threatening notes in his locker, calling him just another thug in training. Teachers who once praised his work now watched him with suspicious eyes as though criminality might be hereditary. Each day Jamal returned home with shoulders increasingly burdened by the weight of injustice, trying to hide his pain from his grandfather, who already carried too much. Support began emerging from unexpected quarters as word of Marcus's situation spread through veterans' networks. James Porter, a retired white Marine who had served in Marcus's unit, was shocked when he recognized his former comrade on a news segment. "That man saved my life and the lives of every man in our unit," he told his wife, voice shaking with anger at Marcus's treatment. "I wouldn't have seen our children grow up if not for him." The next day, Porter made the 3-hour drive to visit Marcus in jail, beginning what would become a crucial alliance. During pre-trial discovery, Sarah uncovered troubling evidence of misconduct. Multiple witness statements contained identical phrasing, suggesting coaching or templated statements, while exculpatory evidence including medical records documenting Marcus's limited mobility mysteriously disappeared from police files. Most concerning, the initial police report described Marcus as calmly speaking to officers before a supervisor arrived and filed an amended report claiming aggressive behavior and assault. When Sarah confronted Assistant District Attorney Brian Palmer about these discrepancies, his response chilled her. "You're young, Ms. Chen, don't damage your career over one criminal. There are lines you don't want to cross." The threat lingered unspoken, but unmistakable in the air between them. Sarah immediately filed a motion to dismiss based on evidence tampering, presenting documentation of the contradictory reports and missing witness statements. Judge Carlton scheduled the hearing for the following week, giving her momentary hope that he recognized the severity of the allegations. That hope shattered during the hearing as Carlton listened to her arguments with visible impatience before cutting her off mid-sentence. "Motion denied," he announced without explanation, refusing to address any of the evidence she presented. "The court finds insufficient basis for these serious allegations against respected officers of the law." His dismissive tone made clear that no evidence would have been sufficient. As bailiffs led Marcus back to holding, Sarah caught the faint smile on District Attorney Holloway's face. In that moment, the true nature of their battle crystallized. For her, this wasn't just about one man or one case. It was about a system designed to protect itself at all costs, regardless of truth or justice. They weren't fighting for a fair hearing. They were fighting against an entire machinery of power, determined to make an example of Marcus Washington. How would you feel if the people deciding your fate were deliberately chosen to be biased against you? Would you think justice was being served if the judge repeatedly silenced your attorney while giving your accusers free rein? This was Marcus. Washington's reality as his trial began with jury selection, a process that should ensure impartiality, but instead revealed the system's deep-seated prejudices. Assistant District Attorney Monica Lawson employed a transparent strategy, using peremptory challenges to eliminate any black potential jurors while offering paper-thin justifications that carefully avoided explicit racial language. The potential juror seemed disengaged, she would say, or showed signs of hostility toward authority figures, when black candidates answered exactly as white jurors who were accepted without question. Sarah objected repeatedly, citing the pattern of racial exclusion, but Judge Carlton overruled her challenges with barely concealed annoyance. "The court finds these challenges are race-neutral," he stated mechanically after each objection, refusing to acknowledge the obvious pattern emerging. The resulting jury comprised 10 white members, 1 Asian man, and 1 Hispanic woman, with no black representation despite the county's 30% black population. Marcus's physical condition deteriorated as the trial approached. The county jail lacked appropriate accommodations for his disability, forcing him to navigate narrow doorways and slippery floors with inadequate support. His pain medication was reduced due to facility policies, leaving him in constant discomfort that etched new lines in his weathered face. When Sarah filed motions requesting medical accommodation, Judge Carlton dismissed them as attempts to delay proceedings and suggested that discomfort might encourage a more realistic perspective on plea offers. The trial opened with a theatrical performance from District Attorney Holloway, who personally delivered the prosecution's opening statement. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that contrasted sharply with Sarah's modest attire, he painted Marcus as a dangerous agitator who exploited his military service as cover for fomenting violence and disrespect for law enforcement. He carefully avoided mentioning Marcus's disability, except to suggest it was exaggerated for sympathy, a claim that caused Marcus to grip the edge of the defense table until his knuckles whitened. Sarah's opening statement emphasized Marcus's service record, community contributions, and the physical impossibility of him performing the alleged assault given his mobility limitations. She highlighted the missing evidence and contradictory police reports, but Judge Carlton interrupted her repeatedly with warnings about making unsupported allegations whenever she mentioned the suspicious evidence handling. The prosecution's case began with testimony from Officers Jackson and Reynolds, who described Marcus as aggressive, threatening, and using his cane as a weapon. Their accounts matched with suspicious precision, using identical phrasing at key points that suggested rehearsed testimony. During cross-examination, Sarah exposed critical contradictions. Officer Jackson claimed Marcus raised his cane overhead in a threatening manner, a physical impossibility given his balance limitations, while Officer Reynolds stated Marcus charged forward. Despite security footage from nearby businesses showing Marcus had remained stationary throughout the encounter, Judge Carlton sustained objections to most of Sarah's questions, preventing her from fully exposing these inconsistencies and instructing the jury to disregard answers that contradicted the prosecution's narrative. The media covered the trial with predictable bias. Conservative outlets portrayed Marcus as emblematic of anti-police sentiment threatening community safety, while liberal publications focused more on abstract issues of protest rights than Marcus's specific situation. Only Tamika Robinson's detailed coverage in the City Observer highlighted the procedural irregularities and evidence issues, publishing court transcripts alongside analysis from legal experts questioning the proceedings' fairness. Her first major article on the case, titled "Justice Blindfolded or Blindsided?" went viral on social media, bringing national attention to Marcus's plight and triggering the hashtag #OurJusticeForMarcus. Jamal's first visit to his grandfather in jail became a pivotal moment in the boy's young life. Seeing Marcus in an orange jumpsuit, shackled despite his disability, the teenager fought back tears that threatened to undermine the brave face he maintained for his grandfather's benefit. "I'm doing fine, Grandpa," he insisted, though his voice cracked with emotion. "Just focus on getting home." Their 20-minute visit passed too quickly, with Marcus dispensing advice about school and Jamal's basketball practice, while avoiding discussion of his own dire circumstances. After Jamal left, Marcus retreated to his cell where the confined space triggered vivid flashbacks to combat. The walls seemed to close in as explosions echoed in his mind, leaving him trembling on his thin mattress until exhaustion finally granted merciful sleep. The trial's dynamic shifted noticeably when veterans began appearing in the gallery. It started with James Porter, sitting ramrod straight in his Marine Corps cap, but soon expanded to include veterans of various ages, races, and service branches. They attended in silent solidarity, their presence a powerful reminder of Marcus's service that the prosecution worked diligently to minimize. Judge Carlton appeared increasingly irritated by their presence, at one point instructing bailiffs to check for appropriate attire when a group arrived wearing military insignia, a transparent attempt to discourage their attendance. Dr. Elena Ramirez, an orthopedic specialist with expertise in prosthetic limitations, testified about Marcus's physical capabilities. She explained in clear, scientific terms why the allegations against him were biomechanically impossible given his prosthetic leg configuration and balance requirements. The described assault would require weight distribution and rapid movement that Mr. Washington is physiologically incapable of executing, she stated, presenting medical imaging and mobility assessments supporting her conclusion. District Attorney Holloway cross-examined her with unusual aggression, questioning her credentials despite her impeccable background and suggesting she was politically motivated when she stood by her professional assessment. The prosecution's case relied heavily on testimony from Martin Delgado, a self-described concerned citizen who claimed to witness Marcus striking an officer unprovoked. Under Sarah's cross-examination, however, Delgado's testimony began unraveling. He couldn't accurately describe the protest location, claimed to see events from a vantage point that was physically impossible, and eventually admitted he had 3 prior convictions for filing false police reports. When Sarah produced social media posts showing Delgado's association with white nationalist groups, Judge Carlton quickly sustained the prosecution's objection and instructed the jury to disregard the revelation, but the damage to his credibility was evident in the jurors' expressions. Do you believe Marcus is receiving a fair trial? Comment number 1 if you think the system is rigged against him, or number 2 if you believe justice will prevail despite these obstacles. The bias in this courtroom is unmistakable, but what would happen when indisputable evidence emerged? Hit that like button if you're following Marcus's fight for justice, and subscribe to follow his journey through America's flawed legal system. Would a disabled veteran who served his country for 30 years be condemned on falsified evidence, or would truth find a way to break through the corruption? The answer awaits in the next part of this extraordinary true story. Sarah Chen sat alone in her cramped office at midnight, surrounded by towering case files and empty coffee cups, when her cell phone vibrated with an unknown number. The caller identified himself only as someone who still believes in the badge, before revealing that police body cam footage from Marcus's arrest existed, despite official claims of equipment malfunction. Check your email in 5 minutes, the voice instructed before disconnecting. The file arrived as promised, showing Officer Reynolds deactivating his camera moments before the confrontation, but not before capturing him telling his partner, "Let's make an example of this one." Officer Jackson's camera continued recording for 30 additional seconds, clearly showing Marcus using his cane for balance, while attempting to de-escalate the situation before being shoved to the ground. The footage abruptly ended, but directly contradicted sworn testimony. Sarah immediately contacted Benjamin Williams, a renowned civil rights attorney who had offered assistance after reading Tamika Robinson's coverage. "This changes everything," he confirmed after reviewing the video, "but Carlton will fight to keep it excluded. We need public pressure alongside legal strategy." Meanwhile, James Porter activated networks within the veterans community, organizing coordinated letter-writing campaigns to elected officials, and arranging for decorated veterans to attend each trial day in uniform. His emotional television interview describing Marcus's heroism went viral, creating public relations challenges for the prosecution. "The man they're calling a violent criminal crawled through enemy fire to drag me to safety," Porter stated, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He lost his leg saving 6 American soldiers. How dare they treat him like this?" Tamika Robinson's investigative persistence uncovered another bombshell. Judge Carlton's son worked as a senior advisor in the district attorney's office under Holloway. This clear conflict of interest had never been disclosed, providing grounds for demanding Carlton's recusal. Sarah and Benjamin immediately filed a motion citing judicial canon violations, but Carlton dismissed it without allowing oral arguments, claiming the relationship was distant and professional, despite evidence of regular family gatherings and vacation photos showing Carlton and Holloway together at the judge's lake house. Marcus's health deteriorated rapidly under jail conditions unsuited to his disability. The prosthetic socket caused pressure sores without proper medical attention, and stress-induced hypertension sent him to the infirmary twice with cardiac concerns. Jail medical staff documented his condition, but provided minimal treatment, noting security concerns as justification for withholding prescribed medications. His normally robust frame had thinned noticeably, and pain etched permanent. Lines around his eyes that hadn't existed before his incarceration. The prosecution, sensing their case weakening under mounting scrutiny, attempted to accelerate proceedings by limiting defense witnesses and objecting to evidence requests. The state has firmly established the defendant's guilt, Holloway argued, urging Carlton to avoid unnecessary delays, despite standard procedures remaining uncompleted. The defense countered by presenting character witnesses whose testimony painted a radically different picture than the prosecution's portrayal. Darius Johnson, a 20-year-old former gang member turned college student, described how Marcus's mentorship transformed his life. "Mr. Washington showed me that my anger came from feeling powerless, but violence only made that worse," he testified, his composure slipping only when describing how Marcus attended his high school graduation when no family member could. "He told me my future was bigger than my past. Without him, I'd be dead or in prison instead of studying engineering." The courtroom fell silent during Johnson's testimony, and even several jurors appeared visibly moved despite Judge Carlton's instructions to maintain neutrality. The pivotal moment came unexpectedly during Marcus's own testimony. Despite medical documentation advising against prolonged sitting in standard chairs, Judge Carlton denied requests for appropriate accommodation. Halfway through cross-examination, Marcus clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain as he struggled to breathe. The courtroom erupted in chaos as he slumped forward. Medical personnel rushed to administer emergency care, while Judge Carlton banged his gavel repeatedly, shouting, "For order," and remarkably suggesting the incident was theatrical timing meant to disrupt proceedings. When Marcus regained consciousness, Carlton threatened contempt charges if such disruptions continued, prompting Benjamin to loudly catalogue violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act for the court record. Outside the courthouse, the community response intensified. Protesters gathered with signs bearing Marcus's military photo alongside the hashtag #StandWithMarcus. Local churches organized prayer vigils, while civil rights organizations arranged transportation for supporters to attend proceedings. What began as local activism expanded nationally after veterans groups from across the country issued statements condemning Marcus's treatment and questioning the justice system's treatment of black veterans more broadly. The case reached a tipping point when an anonymous source leaked the complete unedited security footage from the protest to multiple media outlets simultaneously. The video definitively showed Marcus maintaining a peaceful stance before being shoved by officers who then escalated the confrontation. Most damning, it captured Officer Reynolds telling his partner to make sure the story sticks, while Marcus lay handcuffed on the ground. The footage directly contradicted sworn testimony and revealed deliberate evidence suppression. Social media exploded with outrage as the hashtag #StandWithMarcus became the top trending topic nationwide. Celebrities and political figures issued statements demanding justice, and the governor's office began receiving thousands of calls. District Attorney Holloway held an emergency press conference claiming the footage was heavily edited despite authentication by multiple independent experts, while Judge Carlton issued an emergency gag order forbidding defense attorneys from discussing the video. The momentum had shifted dramatically, but the system's resistance to accountability remained so powerful. As Marcus watched from his jail cell while commentators debated his case on national television, he reflected on the irony that his fight for justice at home had become more dangerous than his battles abroad. Yet for the first time since his car arrest, a fragile hope flickered within him, sustained by the knowledge that truth had finally broken through the darkness. The district attorney's office scrambled to contain the damage, filing emergency motions to have the leaked footage declared inadmissible on procedural grounds. This video was obtained illegally and constitutes fruit of the poisonous tree, Assistant DA Monica Lawson argued before Judge Carlton in a hastily convened hearing, from which the public and press were barred. Carlton granted the motion with remarkable speed, ruling that the footage violated chain of custody requirements and potentially compromised ongoing investigations, despite no evidence supporting either claim. His written decision, spanning just 2 paragraphs, concluded that allowing the jury to see unedited footage would create undue prejudice against the officers involved, a statement that highlighted his fundamental misunderstanding of the justice system's purpose. Sarah and Benjamin immediately filed an emergency appeal with the state appellate court, working through the night to compile precedents demonstrating that exculpatory evidence remained admissible regardless of how it was obtained by third parties. The defense didn't leak this footage, Benjamin argued in their filing. We're merely seeking to present the truth that was deliberately hidden from the court. Their emergency petition included affidavits from forensic experts, confirming the video's authenticity, and timestamps proving it captured the exact incident in question. National media coverage intensified after the footage leak, transforming Marcus's case from local controversy to symbol of systemic injustice. Major networks ran segments questioning the proceedings' fairness, while legal analysts from across the political spectrum expressed concern about judicial conduct and evidence handling. Conservative commentators who initially supported the prosecution began distancing themselves, particularly as veterans groups emphasized Marcus's service record. The spotlight forced the district attorney's office to publicly address questions they had previously ignored, revealing unprepared spokespeople contradicting official records and each other. Civil rights organizations mobilized with unprecedented coordination, filing amicus briefs supporting the defense appeal and connecting Marcus's treatment to broader patterns of discrimination. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund issued a comprehensive report documenting disparities in how courts treated black veterans compared to their white counterparts, using Marcus's case as its central example. Disability rights advocates highlighted HADA violations in his treatment, while legal ethics experts submitted opinions condemning Judge Carlton's handling of evidence and conflicts of interest. This outside pressure created resources the defense couldn't have marshaled alone, transforming a local case into a national referendum on justice. Marcus's jail conditions deteriorated as his public support grew. Guards suddenly found administrative reasons to deny family visits, while his food occasionally arrived with suspicious contaminants. His medication schedule became erratic, with doses mysteriously lost or delivered at incorrect times that minimized their effectiveness. When Benjamin filed complaints about this treatment, jail administrators cited staffing limitations, while suggesting Marcus received special accommodations already beyond what regulations required. Their retaliatory message required no explicit statement. Marcus understood that his growing support made him a target within the system's walls. Jamal, witnessing his grandfather's public vilification, found his own voice through organizing. The thoughtful, reserved teenager transformed into a powerful advocate, organizing a student walkout at his high school that attracted media attention when over 300 students participated. "My grandfather lost his leg defending American values," he told reporters with composure beyond his years. "Now America needs to live up to those values." School administrators threatened disciplinary action, but backed down when civil rights. Attorneys offered pro bono representation to any student facing punishment for peaceful protest. Veterans' response grew into something officials couldn't ignore. The 24-hour vigil outside the courthouse began with James Porter and 5 fellow Marines, but expanded to include hundreds of veterans from all branches and eras, standing in silent rotation regardless of weather conditions. Their disciplined presence created powerful imagery as local news showed elderly veterans in wheelchairs alongside young Afghanistan veterans maintaining their watch through storms and heat waves. When police attempted to disperse them, citing ordinances against overnight gatherings, the veterans simply stood at parade rest, their silent dignity making enforcement politically impossible. James Porter's advocacy forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own past perceptions. "I never thought of myself as prejudiced," he confided to Benjamin during a strategy session. "But looking back, I realize I dismissed things Marcus experienced that I never had to face." This awakening transformed Porter from reluctant witness to passionate advocate, using his privilege as a white veteran to access platforms and audiences typically closed to black advocates. He became a fixture on news programs, challenging hosts who attempted to minimize racial aspects of Marcus's treatment. Military records obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that Judge Carlton and Marcus had indeed served in Vietnam contemporaneously, though in vastly different capacities. While Marcus earned combat decorations on the front lines, Carlton served at division headquarters, 50 miles from combat zones. More troublingly, records indicated Carlton had opposed racial integration policies within military units, writing internal memos warning that black soldiers lacked discipline necessary for complex operations, and recommending segregated assignments for operational efficiency. These documents directly contradicted Carlton's public persona as an unbiased veteran supporting military values. Sarah received escalating threats as the case gained prominence. Anonymous callers to her office detailed her daily routines with disturbing accuracy, while emails contained personal information impossible to obtain through public records. Her law firm's partners called her to a tense meeting where they explained that several major clients had threatened to withdraw their business if the firm continued antagonizing powerful institutions through Marcus's case. "We respect what you're doing," the managing partner explained with practiced regret, "but the firm's survival requires considering broader interests." Sarah chose Marcus over job security, cleaning out her desk that evening while ignoring her colleagues' averted gazes. Benjamin experienced even more direct intimidation when he discovered racial slurs spray-painted on his car outside the courthouse, alongside a crude drawing of a noose. Court security footage of the parking area during the incident had been accidentally overwritten, according to sheriff's deputies who took his report with visible disinterest. That evening, Benjamin's home security system recorded 2 unmarked police cruisers parked outside his residence for hours, their presence a wordless message requiring no interpretation. Jamal discovered threatening letters in their mailbox, prompting community members to establish an informal protection network. Neighbors created rotating schedules to monitor their home, while local businesses installed security cameras angled toward their property at no charge. The community's protective embrace extended to practical support as well. Home-cooked meals appeared daily, volunteers maintained the yard Marcus had previously tended, and retired teachers provided Jamal with after-school tutoring to prevent his grades from suffering amid the turmoil. The case reached its pivotal moment when the state appellate court responded to the emergency appeal with unprecedented speed. A 3-judge panel unanimously ruled that excluding the exculpatory footage constitutes reversible error and ordered Judge Carlton to admit the evidence immediately. Their sharply worded opinion questioned Carlton's impartiality and noted that justice cannot function when truth becomes subordinate to procedure. Most significantly, they referred Carlton's conduct to the Judicial Ethics Committee for review, an extraordinary step that sent shockwaves through the legal community. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus allowed himself to believe that the system might ultimately bend toward justice, even if individual actors within it remained determined to deny him fair treatment. The machinery designed to protect itself had finally encountered resistance too powerful to dismiss or intimidate into silence. Can a system designed to protect itself ever truly deliver justice? Would you stand firm if powerful forces threatened everything you love? As Marcus Washington's case gained national attention, the institutional response grew increasingly desperate and dangerous. These questions aren't hypothetical for a disabled veteran fighting for his freedom against a system determined to make an example of him. Judge Carlton, humiliated by the appellate court's rebuke, transformed his previous hostility into open warfare against the defense. His courtroom manner became overtly antagonistic, addressing Benjamin and Sarah with barely contained contempt, while offering the prosecution extraordinary latitude. When Benjamin attempted to introduce the now admissible video footage, Carlton interrupted constantly, questioning authentication methods already verified by experts and suggesting technical objections the prosecution hadn't even raised. "The court remains unconvinced of this evidence's reliability," Carlton declared despite the appellate ruling, explicitly confirming its admissibility. His tactics couldn't legally exclude the footage, but effectively diminished its impact through procedural obstruction and inappropriate commentary that the jury couldn't unhear. District Attorney Holloway, recognizing the case's deterioration and its potential impact on his political aspirations, authorized a plea offer. Marcus would plead guilty to disorderly conduct, a misdemeanor carrying no additional jail time beyond what he'd already served. The offer represented an extraordinary retreat from their original position, tacitly acknowledging the weakness of their case without explicitly admitting misconduct. Sarah and Benjamin presented the offer to Marcus during a jailhouse conference, explaining its practical advantages while acknowledging the principle at stake. Marcus listened silently, his weathered hands clasped before him, before looking up with unwavering resolve. "I didn't fight for a country where innocent men plead guilty for convenience," he stated quietly. "Truth matters more than freedom. I won't give them a victory they don't deserve, even if it costs me whatever time I have left." His decision, while unsurprising to those who knew him, demonstrated character that moved even Benjamin, a veteran of countless civil rights battles. The prosecution, desperate after their plea offer's rejection, introduced a surprise witness, Gerald Thompson, who claimed to have served with Marcus and described him as violent and insubordinate during their deployment. Thompson testified with rehearsed precision about incidents where Marcus allegedly threatened superior officers and displayed anger management issues in high-stress situations. His testimony directly contradicted Marcus's spotless service record, but introduced doubt among jurors unfamiliar with military documentation procedures. Benjamin's cross-examination systematically dismantled Thompson's credibility through methodical questioning. Records revealed Thompson never served in Marcus's unit or even deployed to Vietnam during the same period. His military service consisted of 8 months before dishonorable discharge for theft of government property. Most damning financial records obtained through emergency subpoena showed deposits to Thompson's account from a shell corporation linked to a police union legal defense fund. When confronted with this evidence, Thompson invoked his Fifth Amendment, protection against self-incrimination, effectively confirming the defense's allegations of perjury and witness tampering. The police department, facing mounting public criticism, announced an internal investigation led by Deputy Chief Wilson, presenting this as evidence of institutional accountability. Benjamin quickly revealed that Wilson had personally approved the amended reports containing false allegations against Marcus, creating an obvious conflict of interest that department spokespeople struggled to explain when confronted by increasingly skeptical reporters. Within days, Officers Jackson and Reynolds took administrative leave for personal reasons, a transparent attempt to remove them from public scrutiny without addressing their misconduct. Their sudden unavailability as witnesses created procedural complications the prosecution exploited to request continuances, delaying the case while Marcus remained incarcerated. Colonel Lawrence Richardson, Marcus's former commanding officer, provided powerful testimony via video conference from his retirement home in Arizona. At 82, Richardson's health prevented travel, but his testimony carried the weight of authority earned through 35 years of distinguished military service. He described Marcus as exemplary in every aspect of his service and recounted specific instances of his courage under fire, including the mission where Marcus lost his leg-saving fellow soldiers. "I've commanded thousands of men throughout my career," Richardson concluded, emotion breaking through his military bearing. Marcus Washington represents the very finest among them. His integrity was beyond question then, and I believe it remains so today. Judge Carlton visibly bristled during Richardson's testimony, interrupting repeatedly with procedural objections and ultimately striking portions from the record as irrelevant to current charges, despite their direct relevance to Marcus's character and contradiction of prosecution claims about his temperament. When Richardson attempted to complete his statement about Marcus's heroism, Carlton muted the video feed, claiming technical difficulties despite the connection's obvious stability. Tamika Robinson's investigation into financial connections between Judge Carlton and private prison corporations revealed troubling conflicts. Carlton held significant investments in prison management companies that directly benefited from harsh sentencing in his courtroom, yet had never disclosed these holdings as required by judicial ethics regulations. Her detailed report included financial statements and contract documents showing that Carlton's investment returns increased proportionally with county incarceration rates. The revelation prompted formal ethics complaints from multiple legal organizations, adding to mounting pressure for Carlton's recusal or removal. Sarah faced professional retaliation after leaving her firm to represent Marcus independently. Her former colleagues, previously supportive in private, now avoided her completely, while other firms made it clear that hiring her would create complications with institutional clients. Financial pressure mounted as case expenses depleted her modest savings, forcing her to move from her apartment to a friend's spare bedroom and sell her car to cover expert witness fees. Despite these sacrifices, she never expressed regret, telling Benjamin, "I became a lawyer to fight exactly this kind of injustice. Everything else is just details." Benjamin discovered his car vandalized with racial slurs after a particularly contentious hearing. Police responding to his report displayed obvious disinterest, suggesting the damage was probably random despite targeted language and the absence of other vandalized vehicles in the area. When Benjamin pressed for fingerprint analysis, officers claimed staffing limitations prevented such measures for minor property damage, though records would later show the same department routinely conducted such analysis for much less significant cases involving different demographics. The intimidation escalated to Benjamin's home when security cameras captured individuals in law enforcement uniforms photographing his residence and tampering with his mail, violations carrying federal penalties that local authorities nevertheless declined to investigate. Jamal discovered threatening letters at their home, ranging from crude racism to specific warnings about Marcus's safety in jail if the case continued. "Back off, or Grandpa won't make it to trial," read one message bearing a sheriff's department postmark that investigators later claimed couldn't be traced to specific personnel. Community volunteers established round-the-clock protection after windows were broken and threatening symbols appeared on the property, creating an informal security detail comprising veterans, church members, and concerned citizens. Their presence deterred further vandalism, but highlighted the authorities' failure to provide protection to which any citizen should be entitled. The case reached its dramatic climax during Marcus's testimony. Despite medical documentation advising against prolonged sitting without appropriate accommodation for his prosthetic leg, Judge Carlton denied all requests for disability accommodation. 4 hours into grueling cross-examination deliberately prolonged by repetitive questioning, Marcus clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain. As he attempted to request a break, he collapsed forward, striking the witness stand before security. Personnel could reach him. Medical personnel rushed to administer emergency care, while Judge Carlton incredulously demanded proceedings continue, suggesting the medical emergency was theatrical timing intended to generate sympathy. Marcus was transported to County Hospital in critical condition, his oxygen levels dangerously low and cardiac readings unstable. Does Marcus Washington deserve justice after risking his life for his country? Comment number 1 if you believe America owes its veterans better treatment, or number 2 if you think the system is working as intended. This case exposes how institutions protect themselves at all costs, crushing individuals who challenge their authority. Hit like and subscribe to see how this community rallies around a hero abandoned by the very system he fought to defend. Will Marcus survive to see justice served, or will powerful forces succeed in silencing him permanently? The battle intensifies as we continue this extraordinary true story. Marcus Washington lay in the county hospital's secure ward, handcuffed to the bed despite his critical condition and the presence of 2 armed guards outside his door. Cardiac monitors beeped steadily while oxygen flowed through a mask covering his face, his normally robust frame now diminished by weeks of inadequate care and constant stress. Medical records detailed the perfect storm of factors leading to his collapse: untreated hypertension, stress-induced cardiomyopathy, and complications from improper prosthetic care during incarceration. Dr. Melissa Howard, the attending physician, documented that Marcus's condition represented a direct consequence of inadequate medical accommodation and inappropriate stress exposure given his documented health conditions. She formally recommended immediate release to proper medical care, stating bluntly that continued detention under current conditions constitutes a significant and unnecessary risk to patient survival. Judge Carlton, unmoved by medical evidence, refused to delay trial proceedings despite Marcus's critical condition. The court's schedule cannot be indefinitely suspended for medical issues that could have been addressed prior to trial, he declared, suggesting Marcus had somehow engineered a cardiac event to disrupt proceedings. Carlton ordered testimony to continue without the defendant present, a procedural irregularity so extreme that even the prosecution appeared uncomfortable with the directive. Benjamin immediately filed for a mistrial, citing fundamental violations of Marcus's constitutional right to confront witnesses against him and participate in his own defense. National outrage erupted when hospital photos leaked, showing Marcus handcuffed to his bed despite his medical condition, and the armed guards ensuring he posed no flight risk. The images circulated widely on social media alongside his military service photos, creating a visceral contrast between his sacrifice for country and his treatment by that same country's justice system. Veterans groups organized mass protests outside the hospital and courthouse, while military family organizations flooded the governor's office with calls demanding intervention. Marcus's cardiac surgeon, Dr. Thomas Chen, took the extraordinary step of publicly condemning the restraints as medically contraindicated and potentially life-threatening, risking his hospital position to advocate for appropriate treatment. Sarah and Benjamin, recognizing that Judge Carlton would never voluntarily recuse himself, despite obvious bias, filed an emergency petition directly with the state Supreme Court. Their comprehensive filing documented Carlton's pattern of prejudicial rulings, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and procedural irregularities so extreme they constituted judicial misconduct rather than mere error. The petition included affidavits from 11 legal ethics professors from prestigious universities, all concluding that Carlton's conduct drastically deviated from minimal standards of judicial impartiality. The unprecedented direct appeal to the state's highest court represented a legal Hail Mary, but Marcus's deteriorating health left no time for traditional appellate procedures. District Attorney Holloway's political support began crumbling as the case attracted scrutiny beyond his control. Corporate donors quietly withdrew campaign pledges, citing concerning publicity around his office's conduct. 2 assistant district AUS attorneys resigned rather than continue participating in the prosecution, while internal whistleblowers leaked memos showing Holloway explicitly discussing the case as an opportunity to send a message to protesters rather than a pursuit of justice based on evidence. Most damaging, his primary opponent in the upcoming elections seized on the controversy, running advertisements featuring James Porter and other veterans questioning Holloway's patriotism for prosecuting a decorated veteran on questionable evidence. Internal police department communications leaked to Tamika. Robinson revealed the depth of misconduct surrounding Marcus's case. Emails between supervising officers discussed the need to align statements after the incident, while text messages showed Officer Reynolds joking about teaching the old man to respect uniforms. Most damning department memos documented deliberate evidence suppression, with one lieutenant instructing technology staff to report the body cam footage as corrupted during upload rather than preserving exculpatory evidence. The documents created an irrefutable paper trail of systematic misconduct that extended far beyond individual officers to implicate command-level personnel. Police Chief Gregory Morrison, previously supportive of his officers without qualification, found himself forced to address the mounting evidence during an uncomfortable press conference. His prepared statement about investigating all allegations thoroughly collapsed under reporters' specific questions about documented misconduct. When confronted with printed copies of departmental emails, Morrison abruptly ended the press conference, claiming he needed to review the specific documents in question before commenting further. His hasty retreat became symbolic of institutional accountability failures, replayed repeatedly on news broadcasts alongside Marcus's military portrait. The Department of Justice announced a preliminary investigation into Carlton County's court practices following formal complaints from multiple civil rights organizations. The announcement represented a significant escalation, moving the case beyond local control and raising the possibility of federal oversight of the county's justice system. DOJ investigators requested comprehensive records of judicial decisions, categorized by defendant demographics, focusing particularly on cases involving veterans and disability accommodation requests. The federal interest sent shockwaves through the local legal establishment, with courthouse staff observed working late hours, sorting through case files in apparent preparation for external review. James Porter organized an unprecedented coalition of veterans to testify about racial disparities in military and civilian life. White veterans described preferential treatment they received from the same systems that penalized their black counterparts, creating powerful first-hand testimony about structural inequality from witnesses whose patriotism conservatives found difficult to question. Their coordinated advocacy shifted public perception by presenting racial justice as patriotic rather than partisan, effectively neutralizing typical political resistance to discrimination claims. When Porter led 300 veterans in full dress uniform on a silent march to the courthouse, the imagery resonated across political divides, generating support from unexpected constituencies. Judge Carlton's carefully constructed public image unraveled as journalists investigated his military service claims. Records revealed he had indeed served in Vietnam, but in an administrative capacity at division headquarters, 50 miles from combat zones and with no record of ever facing enemy fire. This contradicted his frequent courtroom references to battlefield experiences and combat-informed judgment that he used to bolster his authority, particularly when handling veterans' cases. Most damaging performance reviews from his military file noted his resistance to racial integration policies and concerns about his ability to command diverse units effectively, directly contradicting his public persona as an unbiased veteran supporting military values. Media investigations into Carlton's prior cases revealed disturbing patterns invisible when viewed individually, but unmistakable when analyzed collectively. Black defendants in his courtroom received sentences averaging 42% longer than white defendants for identical charges with similar criminal histories. Veterans' disability accommodations were granted to white defendants at nearly 4 times the rate of minority defendants, while black veterans' military service was mentioned in sentencing considerations 80% less frequently than for their white counterparts. These statistics, published in a comprehensive analysis by the State Bar Association's Judicial Watchdog Committee, created irrefutable evidence of systemic bias throughout Carlton's judicial career. The prosecution's case disintegrated as witnesses recanted under public scrutiny. Martin Delgado admitted in a sworn affidavit that officers had promised to drop pending charges against him in exchange for testimony against Marcus, providing text messages supporting his claim. 2 junior officers from the protest scene came forward with new statements contradicting their original reports, claiming supervisors had pressured them to adjust their recollections to support the prosecution narrative. Even the department's use of force expert withdrew his original analysis, conceding that upon reviewing complete footage, Marcus's actions appeared defensive rather than aggressive as he had previously testified. Marcus returned to court against medical advice, determined to face the proceedings regardless of personal cost. His appearance shocked the courtroom. The once robust veteran now required a wheelchair, oxygen support, and medication administered by a nurse who accompanied him on the judge's grudging permission. Despite his weakened condition, Marcus maintained the dignity and composure that had characterized his military service, sitting straight-backed beside his attorneys as proceedings resumed. The visual impact of his deterioration created a powerful counterpoint to the prosecution's portrayal of him as a dangerous aggressor, with jurors visibly affected by the disconnect between allegations and the frail man before them. The breaking point arrived unexpectedly during a procedural hearing on evidence admissibility. Judge Carlton, increasingly erratic as pressure mounted, interrupted Benjamin's argument to issue a contempt charge against Marcus for disrespectful posture in court, specifically citing that Marcus wasn't sitting fully upright in his wheelchair. When Benjamin objected that Marcus's medical condition made the demand unreasonable, Carlton escalated, ordering Marcus to stand for the contempt charge despite extensive medical documentation in the court record detailing his inability to stand, unassisted for more than moments. The court does not recognize disability as exemption from standard courtroom protocol, Carlton declared, setting in motion events that would permanently transform the American justice system's approach to disability, rights and racial equality. The courtroom froze in disbelief as Judge Carlton's words hung in the air. "The defendant will stand to receive this contempt charge," he repeated, voice sharp with authority, despite the medical impossibility of his demand. Marcus Washington, oxygen tube still attached, an IV line extending from his arm, looked toward his attorneys with quiet dignity, masking physical pain. Sarah Chen immediately rose, legal pad clutched in white-knuckled hands. "Your Honor, I must object in the strongest possible terms. Mr. Washington's medical condition is extensively documented in records already submitted to this court. Standing unassisted is physically impossible given his current condition and disability." Benjamin Williams stood alongside her, voice measured but vibrating with controlled anger. "This demand violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, constitutes cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment, and reflects a fundamental miscarriage of justice. We move for immediate recusal based on demonstrated bias against our client." Judge Carlton's face flushed crimson as he banged his gavel repeatedly. "Your objections are overruled, and you are both dangerously close to joining your client in contempt. The court will not be lectured on legal matters by counsel. Mr. Washington will stand now or face additional charges." The threat hung heavy as Marcus slowly reached for his cane, determination replacing resignation in his eyes. Benjamin immediately moved to his side, preparing to assist, but Carlton barked, "The defendant will stand unassisted or face additional penalties for non-compliance." Marcus gripped the defense table with trembling hands, struggling to leverage himself upward, while keeping weight off his prosthetic leg, where pressure sores had developed during his incarceration. His face contorted with effort and pain as he gradually achieved a semi-standing position, leaning heavily on the table. "Fully upright, Mr. Washington," Carlton demanded, refusing to acknowledge the physical impossibility of his order. "The court requires proper respect." Marcus attempted to straighten further, sweat beading on his forehead from exertion, when his prosthetic leg suddenly gave way. The socket, damaged from neglect during his detention and improperly fitted due to weight loss, twisted unnaturally. A barely suppressed groan escaped his lips as he began to collapse, the table's edge insufficient to support his failing balance. The courtroom collectively held its breath, witnesses to calculated cruelty masquerading as procedure. Before deputies could reach him, James Porter rose from the gallery's front row, moving with the decisive quickness of military training. "Permission to assist, sir," he stated to Marcus rather than the judge, Marine to Marine, the simple dignity of the address emphasizing the mockery of justice unfolding. Without waiting for court permission, Porter stabilized Marcus with a veteran's understanding of prosthetic limitations. Carlton banged his gavel furiously. "Bailiffs, remove that man from my courtroom immediately." The deputies hesitated, visibly, uncomfortable with enforcing an order against a decorated veteran assisting an injured comrade. In their moment of hesitation, something extraordinary happened. An elderly white man in the second row slowly stood, his Vietnam veteran cap worn with quiet pride. "I stand with Marcus Washington," he stated simply, his aged voice carrying moral authority no gavel could silence. Beside him, a middle-aged black woman in an Army Reserve uniform rose. "I stand with Marcus Washington." Two younger veterans, one using a cane himself, pushed to their feet. "We stand with Marcus Washington." The movement rippled through the gallery as veterans of different eras, races and genders stood in silent solidarity, joined gradually by civilian spectators, until nearly everyone behind the bar had risen. The courtroom had transformed into something beyond Carlton's authority through the simple, profound act of standing together when one man couldn't stand alone. Benjamin Williams, recognizing the historical weight of the moment, began recording every constitutional violation for the inevitable appeal, while Sarah meticulously documented Carlton's increasingly erratic behavior. Marcus, supported by Porter, drew himself up as straight as his damaged body allowed. The oxygen mask couldn't hide his expression of profound dignity as he addressed the court in a voice weakened by illness, but strengthened by moral clarity. Your Honor, I stood for this country when called, losing my leg in that service. I stood against injustice whenever I witnessed it, including the day these false charges originated. I've stood for truth throughout these proceedings, despite pressure to compromise for convenience. His breathing grew labored, but he continued with unwavering resolve. Today, when I physically cannot stand, others stand with me, demonstrating the true meaning of justice and equality under law. Their standing reveals what this court has forgotten. Justice isn't about authority or procedure, it's about human dignity and equal treatment, regardless of race, background, or physical ability. Judge Carlton, face contorted with rage, repeatedly slammed his gavel. This demonstration is contempt of court. Bailiffs, clear the courtroom immediately and take the defendant into custody. The deputies again hesitated, caught between conflicting duties as the moral bankruptcy of their orders became impossible to ignore. Tamika Robinson, seated in the press section, live-tweeted the unfolding drama with journalistic precision, her real-time reporting causing the hashtag I Stand With Marcus to trend nationally within minutes. Major networks interrupted regular programming as courthouse feeds captured an inflection point in American judicial history, the moment when moral authority visibly transferred from corrupted institutions to ordinary citizens united by commitment to true justice. Outside the courthouse, the crowd of supporters had multiplied as word spread through social media and news alerts. Thousands now gathered in peaceful assembly, maintaining disciplined silence that emphasized the moral gravity of their presence. Veterans organizations coordinated security, ensuring the protest remained non-violent while making its message unmistakable. Inside, Marcus continued, despite Carlton's attempts to silence him. I fought for an America that could be better than the treatment I've received in this courtroom, an America where justice applies equally regardless of race or physical ability, an America where truth matters more than power. His voice faltered as medical stress overtook determination. I may not be able to stand much longer today, but I will never stop standing for those principles, even if this court has abandoned them. His prosthetic leg, damaged from neglect and improper medical care during detention, finally failed completely. Marcus fell hard to the courtroom floor, the impact audible throughout the suddenly silent room. Porter attempted to break his fall, but could only partially mitigate it, leaving Marcus crumpled before the bench in perfect visual metaphor for the system's treatment of vulnerable defendants. Bailiffs finally moved forward, but rather than offering medical assistance, they positioned themselves as though preparing to handcuff the fallen veteran. This final indignity proved too much for the gallery's collective restraint. James Porter placed himself between Marcus and the deputies, his combat decorations visible on his dress uniform. You'll provide medical assistance first, or you'll need to go through me, he stated with quiet authority that made the threat unnecessary. This man saved 6 American lives earning these injuries. He deserves care before custody. The deputies stepped back, recognizing the moral authority opposing them exceeded their institutional authority to enforce unjust orders. The courtroom's transformation became complete when Judge Carlton, apoplectic with rage at his vanishing control, made a fatal error captured by multiple recording devices and the court reporter's transcript. If he'd followed orders like a good soldier, none of this display would be necessary, Carlton spat, the mask of judicial impartiality finally abandoned completely. Some people just need to learn their place. The nakedly prejudiced statement hung in the air as medical personnel finally arrived to attend to Marcus, now drifting in and out of consciousness from the exertion and fall. James Porter, the decorated white Marine whose presence gave him a platform and credibility Marcus had been denied, turned to face Judge Carlton directly. 28 years of military discipline vibrated in his spine as he delivered the most important testimony of his life. I served with Marcus Washington in hell itself, watching him risk everything for men who sometimes wouldn't even share a meal with him back on base because of his skin color. I watched him crawl through enemy fire to drag wounded men to safety. I watched him make the call to draw fire on his own position to save our unit when we were overrun. Porter's voice broke momentarily before he continued with renewed strength. I watched American doctors cut off his leg because he put his body between us and death. And now I've watched an American court put procedure before humanity, prejudice before justice, and cruelty before compassion. His final words carried the quiet moral authority that transcends judicial power. If you want to understand why I stand with Marcus Washington, Your Honor, it's because I learned what real courage and real justice look like by watching him, and neither exists in your courtroom today. The courthouse fell absolutely silent as Porter's indictment hung in the air, unrefuted and irrefutable. In that suspended moment, the system's moral failure became undeniable to all present, including those who had perpetuated it. The confrontation had transcended legal procedure to expose the fundamental question at American justice's heart: whether law would serve human dignity or human dignity would be sacrificed to procedural authority. As Marcus was carried from the courtroom on a medical gurney, the answer had become visibly, undeniably clear. The aftermath of Marcus Washington's collapse created chaos inside the courtroom. Medical personnel rushed to stabilize him, while Judge Carlton continued shouting for order, his commands increasingly disconnected from the humanitarian emergency, unfolding before the bench. Paramedics quickly determined Marcus needed immediate hospitalization, his oxygen levels dangerously low, and cardiac rhythm showing concerning irregularities. As they prepared him for transport, Carlton made his most damaging statement yet, captured clearly on the court's official recording system. If he'd followed orders like a good soldier, none of this display would be necessary, the judge declared, voice dripping with contempt. Some people always have to make things difficult. The mask of impartiality had fallen completely, revealing the prejudice underlying his judicial conduct. The courtroom erupted into shocked murmurs as deputies struggled to maintain order without appearing to support Carlton's increasingly indefensible position. The moment crystallized the case's fundamental injustice in terms too explicit for even casual observers to ignore. James Porter, who had spent decades trying to reconcile his white privilege with the disparate treatment his black comrades received, found perfect clarity in that moment. Standing at parade rest before the bench, medals earned alongside Marcus, gleaming on his dress uniform, the decorated Marine delivered an impromptu address that courthouse veterans would later describe as the most powerful testimony they'd ever witnessed. I served with Marcus Washington in Vietnam's jungles, watching him risk everything for men who sometimes wouldn't even share a meal with him back on base because of his skin color, Porter began, his weathered face radiating moral authority. No judicial robe could match. I watched him crawl through enemy fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety, while bullets tore through the air around him. I watched him call in fire dangerously close to his own position to save our unit when we were overrun. Emotion momentarily overwhelmed his military bearing before he continued with renewed intensity. I watched American doctors amputate his leg because he deliberately placed his body between his fellow soldiers and death. And now I've watched an American court put procedure before humanity, prejudice before justice, and cruelty before compassion. His final words carried quiet moral certainty that transcended institutional power. If you want to understand why I stand with Marcus Washington today, Your Honor, it's because I learned what real courage and real justice look like by watching him, and neither exists in your courtroom. The silence following Porter's statement held the weight of undeniable truth. Even Carlton seemed momentarily stunned, his authority undermined not by procedural challenge, but by moral witness he couldn't dismiss. Chief Justice Eleanor Simmons of the State Supreme Court, watching the live stream from her chambers after receiving the emergency appeal, immediately issued an extraordinary judicial order. The rarely used emergency power suspended all proceedings in Carlton's courtroom pending review, temporarily assigning Senior Judge Thomas Mitchell to oversee the case remotely. Mitchell's first action was ordering Marcus released to appropriate medical care without bail restrictions, citing extraordinary. Circumstances and humanitarian necessity. The independent medical evaluation he ordered documented the extent of Marcus's mistreatment. Untreated pressure sores from improper prosthetic accommodation, cardiac damage from stress and inadequate medication, and significant weight loss from insufficient nutrition during detention. These findings triggered investigations by prison oversight boards and disability rights organizations, eventually resulting in systemic reforms to detention medical protocols statewide. Governor Alicia Richardson, facing mounting public pressure and recognizing the political liability of inaction, established an independent commission to investigate the entire case. Led by retired State Supreme Court Justice Robert Tompkins, known for his stringent ethical standards, the commission received authority to access all records and compel testimony from all involved parties. Their preliminary findings identified procedural violations so numerous and severe that the State Attorney General's office opened parallel investigations into multiple agencies' conduct. The Department of Justice announced a comprehensive civil rights investigation focused not merely on Marcus's case, but on patterns of discriminatory practices throughout Carlton County's criminal justice system. Federal investigators arrived within days, requesting decades of case records categorized by defendant demographics, alongside internal communications related to racial disparity concerns. The unprecedented federal intervention sent shockwaves through local government, with multiple officials preemptively resigning rather than face scrutiny of their conduct. Judge Carlton found himself suspended pending review by the Judicial Ethics Committee, the board's unanimous vote reflecting the indefensible nature of his recorded statements and documented pattern of biased rulings. His chambers were sealed by court order while investigators reviewed his case histories and financial records, ultimately discovering extensive undisclosed investments in private prison corporations directly benefiting from his harsh sentencing practices, particularly toward minority defendants. The conflicts of interest proved so egregious that criminal charges for judicial misconduct became increasingly likely. District Attorney Richard Holloway, recognizing his political future evaporating, attempted damage control by publicly acknowledging procedural concerns in the case while deflecting personal responsibility. The strategy failed spectacularly when internal memos leaked, showing he had personally directed prosecutors to pursue maximum charges against Marcus as an opportunity to send a message to these protesters. Facing likely ethics violations that could threaten his law license, Holloway announced his withdrawal from the upcoming election, effectively ending his political career. The prosecutor's office, under intense scrutiny, filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Marcus with prejudice, preventing any possibility of refiling. The motion acknowledged insurmountable evidentiary issues without directly admitting misconduct, but the subtext was clear to all observers. The case had been fundamentally corrupt from its inception. Judge Mitchell granted the motion immediately, formally exonerating Marcus and ordering all related records expunged. Marcus's recovery progressed slowly in the Veterans Hospital, where he was transferred following his release. Weeks of physical therapy helped restore strength diminished during detention, while specialists addressed the damage to his heart and circulatory system. His medical team expressed cautious optimism about his long-term prognosis, though they acknowledged he would likely never regain his previous robust health. The emotional healing proved equally challenging, with PTSD symptoms intensified by his justice system experience requiring specialized psychological support. The community rallied around Marcus and Jamal as they began rebuilding their interrupted lives. Local contractors volunteered to make accessibility modifications to their home, while a fundraising campaign initiated by veterans groups covered medical expenses not addressed by government benefits. Jamal's school established a scholarship in Marcus's name for students pursuing careers in social justice, with the teenager proud to participate in the selection committee. The neighborhood protection network that had guarded their home during the case transformed into a community improvement initiative, addressing issues from food insecurity to youth mentorship with Marcus's case as its inspirational foundation. Sarah Chen and Benjamin Williams, established the Washington Justice Foundation, using donations that flowed in after the case gained national attention. The non-profit organization provided legal representation to veterans facing discrimination and systemic barriers, with particular focus on racial disparities in the justice system. Their first major initiative supported 28 black veterans with disability accommodation issues, similar to Marcus's, creating precedent-setting cases that reformed policies across multiple jurisdictions. Congressional attention focused on the case when Representative Elaine Jefferson introduced the Marcus Washington Military Justice Act, establishing enhanced protections for veterans in the criminal justice system and mandating appropriate disability accommodations. The bipartisan legislation passed with overwhelming support, political divisions temporarily suspended in recognition of the moral clarity Marcus's case provided. President Robert Mitchell signed the bill during a White House ceremony with Marcus and Jamal in attendance, acknowledging the veteran's reluctant but powerful contribution to American justice reform. Tamika Robinson received the Pulitzer Prize for her investigative reporting on the case, her meticulous documentation of systemic failures providing the foundation for subsequent reforms. Her series Justice Denied: The Marcus Washington Story became required reading in journalism schools nationwide, demonstrating the essential role of independent media in exposing institutional corruption. The young reporter established a mentorship program for journalists of color, creating pathways for diverse voices in a field still struggling with representation issues. James Porter and Marcus established the Cross-Racial Veteran Alliance, an organization dedicated to addressing racial disparities in veteran services and promoting understanding between veterans of different backgrounds. Their programming explicitly confronted the uncomfortable reality that soldiers who fought together faced radically different treatment upon returning home based solely on race. The organization's signature initiative paired white veterans with veterans of color in advocacy partnerships that leveraged privilege while centering marginalized experiences, creating a model eventually adopted by multiple national veterans organizations. 1 year after his courthouse collapse, Marcus testified before Congress. His health improved, though still requiring supplemental oxygen during extended exertion. His powerful testimony about systemic discrimination faced by veterans of color influenced policy discussions from healthcare access to disability accommodation, his personal experience illuminating statistical realities previously easy for lawmakers to ignore. The hearing room fell completely silent when he described how it felt to be denied the dignity of appropriate accommodation after losing his leg in service to the country, now treating him as disposable. The final chapter in Marcus's journey came unexpectedly when he requested a meeting with former Judge Carlton, now removed from the bench and facing potential disbarment. The private conversation occurred in Carlton's home, the former judge initially reluctant, but ultimately agreeing, at his attorney's recommendation. What transpired between them remained largely private, though Carlton later described the encounter as transformative in his own testimonial to the Judicial Ethics Committee. Witnesses observed Marcus arriving with his Purple Heart Medal and leaving without it, having apparently given the decoration to Carlton. When questioned about this surprising gesture, Marcus offered a simple explanation that encapsulated his extraordinary character. That medal was earned by blood, that's all. The same color. If understanding that helps him judge better in the future, even informally, it's worth more there than on my shelf. The case that began with a disabled veteran being ordered to stand ultimately transformed into a moment when America itself was forced to stand for its highest ideals rather than its deepest prejudices. Marcus Washington never sought to become a symbol, but his dignity in the face of systemic cruelty created a watershed moment in the ongoing struggle for true equality under law. His legacy lives not merely in legislation bearing his name, but in the fundamental principle his case enshrined in American consciousness, that true justice requires standing together when any among us cannot stand alone. Have you ever witnessed injustice and felt powerless to stop it? Marcus Washington's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest courage is simply refusing to accept what's wrong, even when the entire system stands against you. If this story moved you, Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of resilience and justice. Share this video to spread Marcus's legacy and help others understand that real strength isn't about standing over others, but standing with them when they cannot stand alone. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. And remember, justice is never just about laws, but about the human dignity those laws are meant to protect. Marcus Washington's story teaches us that justice is not merely a legal concept, but a moral imperative that requires collective action. When systems designed to protect everyone instead protect only the privileged, standing together becomes an act of profound courage. The courtroom transformation, from a place where authority silenced truth to one where ordinary citizens reclaimed moral power, reminds us that institutional change begins with individual conscience. True strength isn't found in power over others, but in standing alongside those who cannot stand alone. Marcus lost his leg defending American ideals abroad, only to find those same ideals threatened at home, yet his dignity never wavered. His struggle illustrates how racial discrimination corrupts even our most sacred institutions, creating parallel systems of justice divided by color lines that many refuse to acknowledge. The veterans who stood when Marcus couldn't demonstrated that allyship isn't about speaking for others, but standing with them, using privilege to amplify rather than replace marginalized voices. They understood that injustice against one diminishes justice for all. Perhaps most powerful was Marcus giving his Purple Heart to the judge who persecuted him, recognizing that reconciliation sometimes requires offering dignity to those who denied it to you. This extraordinary grace reminds us that justice without compassion becomes another form of oppression. The highest form of courage is maintaining your humanity when others have abandoned theirs. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race or disability? What did you do or wish you had done? Share your experience in the comments below. If Marcus's struggle for dignity and justice in the face of racial discrimination moved you, please hit that subscribe button to join our community fighting for equality. Your likes and shares help ensure stories like Marcus's reach those who need to hear them most. Together we can build a justice system that truly protects everyone, regardless of race, ability, or background. Thank you for bearing witness to this powerful story of resilience and courage. Remember, in a world where some cannot stand alone, the greatest act of patriotism is standing together.